PSG ultras have always been, I think, committed supporters of the Palestinian cause. We saw Palestinian flags behind the goal. We saw them march through the city of Munich with a Palestinian flag. I've seen pieces about the Palestinian national team referred to as Palestine because all these countries get referred to by their first name. They get referred to as Palestinian team by CNN, by Associated Press. So it's not surprising, and I don't think it's new. But we also have to recognize that this is the pressing issue of not only of the day, but of our times, the essence of football. And that is, football is a community event and your values are represented by your club. And I think what we've seen is the people who are actually part of the latter group stand up and say, I really hate this. I don't want to be affiliated with providing cover or aiding and abetting a genocide. Learn a little bit about the struggles of the national team, because I think it's a great way of actually telling the Palestinian story.
Welcome to the FloodGate podcast, a vital space for critical conversations brought to you by the Palestine Chronicle. I'm your host, Ramzi Baroud. Before we start, we ask you to please support our work by subscribing to our YouTube channel and by following us through whichever medium you are currently using to listen to this important conversation. Our special guest for this podcast is Bassil Mikdadi. Bassil is a journalist specializing in the intersectionality of football and society and the founder of Football Palestine. Of course, there will be more information about Football Palestine in the comments below and also in the content we are going to be producing about this important conversation. Bassil, first of all, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ramzi. It's a pleasure to be a guest on your podcast.
Let's start with the obvious. I wanted to talk actually to start talking about what happened in the final game, in the Champions League game between Paris Saint-Germain and Inter Milan, and then I will talk about FIFA. If we could just try to understand what is going on here as far as the pro-Palestine solidarity action that came with that game, that accompanied the game between Paris Saint-Germain and Inter. PSG supporters in particular used the final match on May 31st to call for an end to Israel's genocide in Gaza. Banners, chants, open defiance, and that's important, of efforts to depoliticize the event by the organizers. What do you make of that show of solidarity? Does it signal a growing shift among football fans when it comes to Palestine?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ramzi. I think the shift has already happened, especially amongst active supporters. So for those that maybe don't follow the sport so much, there are dedicated supporters groups that follow teams wherever they go. And in the home stadium, they usually sit behind the goal and they make a lot of noise. They provide the atmosphere in the stadium, and they're referred to as ultras typically. So the PSG ultras have always been, I think, committed supporters of the Palestinian cause. And we saw Palestinian flags behind the goal. We saw them march through the city of Munich with a Palestinian flag, something that I believe you can get arrested for in Germany. And it's not the first time they've done that. They've done that throughout the season. They did it last season. They unveiled a huge tifo, a huge banner behind the goal in the Parc des Princes, their home stadium, in the Champions League earlier. I believe it might have been in October or November against Atletico Madrid. So this isn't something new, but I think what's really interesting here is that there is a concerted effort by everyone who covers the sport not to talk about this. Mm-hmm. So, the PSG Ultras have been part of the Show Israel, the Red Card campaign. And there's been just so many, I can't even keep count of how many acts of solidarity there have been in Europe and all over the world, frankly. But the people who cover football for the mainstream outlets act as if it just doesn't happen, and even if they're covering a game and there's a huge, Palestine banner, or there are, hundreds of Palestinian flags, they'll go out about talking as if it's just not happening, which is frankly ludicrous and a little bit surreal.
But Bassil, is this a new phenomenon related to what happened in the World Cup in Qatar, or has this phenomenon of kind of ignoring this obvious solidarity with the Palestinians while commenting on every little detail in the stadium but ignoring the Palestine solidarity? Is this an old tradition that media in general have been doing?
Well, I think in the past couple of years, and this has also become more evident after October 7th, there's sort of been a rule in media where you don't mention Palestine. And I remember after the events of May 2021, there was a discussion amongst us Palestinian journalists about how difficult it is to deal with the likes of Associated Press, Reuters, CNN, Deutsche Welle. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but they will not let you mention the word occupation when they commission you to write a piece about the occupation, or you can't use the word Palestine, you have to use Palestinian territories. I've seen pieces about the Palestinian national team referred to as Palestine because all these countries get referred to by their first name. They get referred to as Palestinian team by CNN, by Associated Press. So it's not surprising, and I don't think it's new, but we also have to recognize that this is the pressing issue of not only of the day, but of our times. And this is no longer, an issue that matters to the Arabs or people who live in the region or people somehow affiliated to Palestine. It is a matter of being counted, because hundreds of thousands of people have died. People are being starved to death. Every day we see horrible images. And I think people around the world realize that, we might not be there, but we are aiding and abetting because our governments are complicit, and they continue to send military aid. They continue to do economic trade. And if they don't do that, they're providing diplomatic cover. So I think that's why it's become more prominent. And we've also seen that in the stadiums as well. We've seen more Palestinian flags and more tifos. We never saw this before the events of October 7th.
And I want to talk about how this kind of solidarity can be streamlined into kind of actual political movement later in the program. But if we could just talk about, just one thing that I've noticed, I have attended many sports events in which I saw some display related to Palestine, sometimes a flag or two, sometimes a whole movement. Napoli, that won the Serie A, this always they are very well known of kind of always factoring in Palestine as part of their celebrations. And I've been to Napoli after not this current win, but the previous one. And even though it had weeks had passed, you could still see the elements of the Palestine solidarities in the streets, the flags and the graffiti and all of that. But this time around in the Paris Saint-Germain, it's not just about a group of people from outside, a solidarity group that is interested in both politics and sports, coming in with their flags and saying, hey, we are also part of this movement. No, it seemed like the entire setup had Palestine being a focal point. And this is why I was asking if you feel that there is a change in the momentum and the type of access that sports fans now have. They are becoming so politicized compared to what things used to be.
Well, I think we have to make a clear delineation, and that is football is the most popular sport in the world, which means it gets the most eyeballs, which means a lot of different people now watch football. Educated professionals, the rich, the poor, the people in between, men, women, just a broad cross-section of society. But what I like to say is that there are really two types of people who watch football. There are people who consume the product, and there are people who are actual supporters. And the people who fall in the latter category, I think, get the essence of football. And that is, football is a community event, and your values are represented by your club. And I think what we've seen is the people who are actually part of the latter group stand up and say, I really hate this. I don't want to be affiliated with providing cover or aiding and abetting a genocide. I support the Palestinian people. And efforts to crack down on them has only sort of redoubled their efforts to get the message out there, because, ultras groups have had a tough time with police. And I'm not talking about hooliganism. I want to make that absolutely clear. But, when you have a group of people who are mobilizing and are suspect of central power, the relations aren't going to be very good. Now, the problem is that football has become a product. And so the clubs themselves, even a club like Celtic, for example, which is seen as being very supportive of the cause, it's not Celtic, the club, that is supportive of the cause. The board would love for this problem just to go away. The supporters make sure every game at Celtic Park that it is front and center because it is close to their hearts. And, if we talk about people who are, maybe not from England, but support a Premier League team, not from Spain, but support Real Madrid and Barcelona, these people are quite, they are not actually part and parcel of the club's fabric, right? They are important to the club because they are consumers of the product. And listen, they might be pro-Palestine, but they have very little way of showing it. It is only the people who are part and parcel of the club's fabric, the ultras groups who are there providing the atmosphere in the stadium, that can really move the needle, especially in the cultural zeitgeist, so to speak.
Okay, so you spoke about the Celtics, and I'm glad you brought this up. I want to know why the Celtics in particular have always been keen on Palestine, and why the Celtic fans or fan base has really reached that critical mass of support for Palestine, and it's been going on for a long time. But I also want to kind of share this very, very quick story with you. At one point, I was doing a tour in Scotland, and I've noticed that there was a good number of people attending, book signing, all of that, but I did not see the Celtic fans there, which I was surprised. I was like, I know that there's a huge support group for Palestine here that is sports oriented, and why aren't they participating in this kind of academic cultural events? And the answer was, well, they do their thing, we do our thing, and that kind of left me thinking: is it that we are within the solidarity movement unable to relate to that existing degree of support, or it is indeed a question of they do their thing and we do our thing, and what happened in South Africa, and particularly how the sports boycott became kind of the rally cry for the global solidarity with the anti-apartheid movement. Are we not able to bridge this gap in our movement, or do you think there's more complexity than that?
You bring up, I think, a very interesting point. I do think, and I won't really use Celtic as an example, I'll use the Palestinian national team as an example, right? There's been a lot of talk and attention on Palestine, and that's not really a good thing, right? Because it's because of this genocide that's happening that there is this attention. But that does mean that people have learned a lot about Palestine. They've learned about the history, they've learned about the culture, they've learned about the origins of the conflict. They've completely shifted their views in some cases, and that is down to people who've done the hard yards, who are part of solidarity and have been activists for decades, right, entire lifetimes in some cases. But at the same time, we've been speaking now for about a quarter of an hour, and we've spoken about the European clubs. And their fans and their support of the Palestinian cause, but we haven't spoken about the Palestine national team. And I do think that's because there is a bit of a gulf, really, between the activist solidarity scene and then things that are more visceral. And the things that would be more visceral would be things like the ultras groups and their actions, and something relatively niche, but very, very culturally important, but maybe confined to one narrow thing, because watching and supporting the Palestine national team is not part of consuming a product. It hasn't been commercialized yet. So I think there is a gap. That said, I do think the gap can be bridged.
Okay. No, it's just if we could stay on this point, because we need to talk about this gap. I mean, we talk about the narrative. I mean, when we discuss narratives and discourses, now we are abandoning this idea that the West and Western journalists and Western writers and intellectuals will be are the ones who are capable of telling the Palestinian story, because the Palestinians, for some reason, we became marginal as narrators of our own story. Gaza has challenged all of that. And Gaza is single-handedly telling a story that has defeated the Zionist discourse like never before in history. So why can't we do it in sports? But then I will challenge you with this question. Is it possible that, yeah, sure, it's about the consumer element of sports, but also because the Palestinian national team is linked to the Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinian Authority is not exactly keen on the element of activism and using sports as a way to build solidarity.
No, I mean, I would disagree with you there. I think, we sort of have to take a decolonial stance on this, and that is, look, I love the fact that the PSG Ultras showed support during the Champions League final. I like that during the Scudetto celebrations, the Napoli fans were out with Palestinian flags. That's all well and good. Celtic support is well appreciated. That said, that is auxiliary, right? They're not front and center. It's not their cause, so to speak. It's they're friends of the cause, and you need to be able to relay your own story. And the way you relay your own story is by supporting your own team, right? So if you're Palestinian and you consider yourself a football fan, and you know the starting 11 of your favorite team, whether that be a team in the Premier League or Serie A or La Liga or what have you, and then you struggle or cannot name players that are on the Palestine national team, then I think you have to look at yourself in the mirror. Going to your point of their affiliation with the Palestinian Authority. Look, I had my differences with the Palestine Football Association over the years. I've covered the national team for more than 15 years now. They haven't exactly run the national team in the best way possible, but I don't think they've done anything. I don't think they've done a concerted effort to clamp down on activism or anything like that, simply because they're too incompetent to kind of think 3 steps ahead. And now that being said, we're also talking about a team that's been quite remarkable in that, when I started covering this team 15 years ago, results were secondary. Support, financial or otherwise, was non-existent. Players would show up, the national team would show up with their own kit, meaning that you get pictures of, the national team has met for their first training today. And basically it's players in the jerseys of their favorite teams, which was a ridiculous sight to see. And then something changed. A miracle happened in 2014 when Palestine qualified for their first ever Asian Cup. And then I think the penny dropped for the Palestinian Football Association. I think the PFA president, who's one of a dozen candidates who wants to become the PA president, said, I can take advantage of this. And a little bit of support made their way there. And since then, they've qualified for three more Asian Cups. And, we're in a situation now where they could qualify for the next round of World Cup qualifying and find themselves in a situation where they're 2 games away from a World Cup. How many people know about this is an open question. And I find that a bit of a pity, especially considering, all this attention Palestine is getting. And the fact that, you see Palestinian flags in European stadiums, but you don't see kind of the same attention being given to the national team itself.
So if you could walk us through this, as journalists, as fans of Palestinian football, but also as solidarity people, how do we want to change this situation, and we want to make Palestinian football a center stage for the sake of the team itself and their accomplishments, but also for the sake of the Palestine discourse as well. How do we go about it as journalists? What do we do in order for us to center Palestinian football?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, there has to be a concerted effort for everyone to educate themselves. And look, I'm not asking somebody who maybe doesn't follow sports or doesn't like football to all of a sudden start watching football. That's not my ask here. My ask is that, if you're a fan of football, there's information out there and you can watch games now quite easily. Start doing that. The way you support your favorite team on a week-to-week basis, start doing that for the national team as well. Learn a little bit about the struggles of the national team, because I think it's a great way of actually telling the Palestinian story. I think if you actually look at the history of this national team, which is almost 100 years old, you look at the perfect, I think, story of modern Palestinian history. So I think, everyone sort of has to look at themselves, and the people who are more closely affiliated to football, the people who consider themselves football fans, have a bit of homework to do, in that they need to educate themselves about this team, because this is the team that will represent them the best. This is not a team that's going to go and sign a sponsorship agreement with a company that's on the BDS list. They're not going to sign an Israeli player. They're not, Arsenal a couple of weeks ago, in December, fired their kit man because he posted about Gaza. Obviously, these things aren't going to happen in a Palestine national team because it represents you as a Palestinian person. And even if you're not Palestinian yourself, even if you're just an activist, you're a member of the Solidarity Campaign, I think you'd also really love watching and following this team, because this is a team that represents football in its purest form, divorced from ego, divorced from commercial consideration, going out there, playing for the love of the game, and also trying to represent a nation and a cause.
And of course, they are not just trying to overcome numerous obstacles of occupation and apartheid and all of that, but now there are at least a large branch of them is facing, the extermination that the whole of Gaza is facing at the moment. We follow you very closely, Bassil, but we also publish articles by Issam Khalidi, a scholar of Palestinian sports. In January, and things have been added, more numbers have been added to the figures I'm about to read. He reported that over 50 sports clubs in Gaza have been completely destroyed, with estimated material losses of more than $20 million. We also know that, according to figures released also last January, that at least 700 athletes have been killed since the beginning of the war and genocide. Beyond the physical damage, beyond all these losses, what are the long-term consequences, in your opinion, of Israel's war and genocide on the Palestinian sports as a whole?
It's very hard to see long-term how Palestinian sport recovers from this, because Gaza has been, I think, integral to Palestinian sport, especially Palestinian football. They provided, I think if you break it down, maybe 10% of the footballers who have ever represented Palestine nationally or internationally, I should say, are from Gaza. And it's always been a factory. Now, the national team as it stands, the players on that team are not in the line of fire because they all play their football abroad right now. But, I heard stories. I know people. I know footballers who played with the national team that have died. So two players, the player that represented the first national team, Marine Moghrabi, was killed in January of last year. You had Mohamed Barakat, another Gazan footballer, who was killed in March of last year in an airstrike. You had Hani Al-Masdar, who was an assistant coach for the under-23 team. These are all people who are not just an average footballer, but people who are quite well known and had a long history with the national team. What it means for the future, we don't know. But, I think people who've been following this team for the past 10 years or so have been used to the team getting better with time. And that's never a guarantee. Even in a stable, normal country with a functioning league, you have a generation that's better than the one that came before it. And sometimes it's hard to kind of maintain that level. In Palestine's case, well, their entire improvement was on the back of the fact that for 15 years, give or take, in Gaza and the West Bank, a league was played. They finished a league season, which was not the case during the Second Intifada. And bit by bit, although the league was maybe not the best quality, the national team improved. As the national team improved, young players got opportunities to go abroad. They improved, and the ones that came after them were even better. So we have a very, very talented generation. But what comes after this is a huge question mark.
Now, we know that Israel has made it clear, Bassil, that you have this geographic isolation of Gaza, separation between the West Bank and Gaza, but also separation within the West Bank itself, Area A, B, and C, Jerusalem, a whole different legal status in Israeli law, and so forth. But sports is still something that unifies Palestinians. I mean, many other factors unify Palestinians, but sports is very important unifier of Palestinians. And we see, even during the previous siege on Gaza, before the war, we would see Palestinian teams from the West Bank coming to Gaza to play. although it's much more difficult for Gazans to go to the West Bank. How do you see the sports as a formula for unity among Palestinians at home and also in the Shatat, in diaspora?
Yeah, I think the national team, and I don't want to take away from other sports, right? Because Palestinians play other sports, not just football, but football is the one we happen to be the best at, and it's the one that is most culturally relevant, and it's a team sport. In the context of football, the national team, I think, is the most representative body of Palestinians that you can find anywhere in the world. I say that because you look at a starting 11 for the national team, and you have players from Gaza, from the West Bank, from Jerusalem, from inside the Green Line, from the diaspora. And then when they're playing in the team, you don't think, oh, this guy's from Gaza, and this guy's from this town or village in the West Bank, and this guy's a 48er. No, they're all playing for Palestine, and there are no cliques within the team. They all are brothers, and they're all unified, and that's sort of been the secret to their success. And I have seen, I've covered 3 Asian Cups, and I have seen the support, the discourse, the hype around the team build bit by bit by bit by bit. It's not where I would like it to be, quite frankly, but it is getting to a place where we want it to be. And I think if you watch this team, regardless if you're Palestinian or not, I think it's very hard not to fall in love with them, because it is a team that is unified and fighting for a cause, and they know when they step on the field, it's not about them as athletes or them as individuals. It's about something far, far, far greater, and you can see that when they play.
Okay, that's brilliant, and we also kind of see that energy also catching on as far as the fan base beyond Palestine, of course. I wanted to start with the question about FIFA, but then I thought to just kind of lay the ground and a foundation for that discussion. But let's go back to that question.
Yeah.
The FIFA acted quickly to suspend Russia following its invasion of Ukraine, but it has refused, and vehemently so, to take similar steps against Israel. Now, we just refer to this as the hypocrisy of FIFA, the same way that we talk about a hypocrisy of international law, hypocrisy of international institutions, and so forth and so on. Do you think it's just a case of hypocrisy? Is there more to it than that? What made Russia different? And what is the Palestine Football Association doing or can learn from this comparison to overcome this deeply embedded bias?
Oh, obviously it's hypocrisy. I don't think there's any other explanation. I think that's just obvious at this point. Now, in order to understand the semantics of what happened, FIFA didn't come out and say, oh, Russia, we're going to kick you out because you invaded Ukraine. FIFA did not want to do that. And I think UEFA was a little bit reticent to do that as well. That's the European governing body. What happened in the immediate aftermath, and I'm talking hours after Russia invaded Ukraine, was that the players of 3 other national teams that were due to play Russia in World Cup qualifying for the Qatar World Cup stood up and said, we don't want to play. And those 3 nations were Poland, Sweden, and the Czech Republic. And the captains of those 3 countries, representing their teammates, said, hey, listen, if it means we have to withdraw, we're going to withdraw, because to play Russia after they've invaded Ukraine is a complete farce. Now, the moment they did that, then the national associations, their hands were forced, right? It would be ridiculous for them not to support their players, so they supported their players. The moment you had these 3 federations taking that stance, then other federations started to back them. Maybe cynically, right? Because the Russia-Ukraine conflict is multi-layered. You have the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and then you have, the conflict between Russia and the United States now. But rightly or wrongly, other nations backed this action. So UEFA said, we're going to kick Russia out. FIFA initially had a harebrained scheme to keep Russia in while also punishing them. And that was they can play, but they play in like white jerseys and their national anthem isn't played and they don't play under the Russian flag, but they can play because we don't want to punish athletes. And of course, the age-old axiom of we don't mix politics with sports.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, FIFA's hand was forced at that point, right? Because of a group of players, right? This was player power forcing FIFA's hand. And then FIFA fell in line, I think, because of global politics, really, right? When you have the world superpower saying what Russia did was bad, and let's be clear, we're not hypocrites. We can recognize that countries illegally invading countries, even if they're not Israel and Palestine, are universally wrong. It's illegal by international law. Then people all of a sudden put their hands up and they said, "Oh yeah, this is a break of international law, and we're going to suspend Russia until we can figure out what to do here." There was a small attempt of trying to get Russia's youth teams to play, and then that was completely thrown out. And this was, I think, a couple of months after the invasion. So that's the Russia-Ukraine story. And I think that's very important context,
Yes.
because when we look at the power structure between Palestine and Israel, first of all, you don't have the support of a superpower to kind of back your cause. That's not in play. The other thing that's not really in play, or the strategy that's not really in play, is to go to players and to try and get them on your side. What has happened so far is that the Palestine Football Association, says, "Hey, listen, I found the legality, and look, Article 1, Paragraph 3 says this. Why don't you uphold your own charter?" Yeah, completely correct. And at every juncture, there's been 6 times where this has gone to FIFA. FIFA has studied the case and then said they needed more time to study the case. And they're just going to keep, now it's obvious that they will just keep on doing this because they are too afraid to take this decision because, look, the power players in the game, the sponsors, football now is so big that we can also talk about the individual politicians in many countries don't want this to happen. But I do think there is hope, but the strategy needs to be different. And I just think the Palestine Football Association doesn't have a plan B. They have a plan A, and plan A has failed. And they're not really thinking about a plan B. And if they want to see this through to some success, they need to think about a plan B, and they need to realize that things have changed, and how you sort of create influence and power isn't in the halls of FIFA congresses. Sometimes it's on the street.
And I'm exactly. I want to tap into this, the question that I raised earlier about kind of knowing how to streamline these existing energies that are happening everywhere around the world, and to try to use them as that plan B. We know how pivotal or a pivotal role that the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, how it benefited from the sports boycott, and I know it is harder to achieve boycott, that kind of sports boycotts in nowadays because of this kind of consumer-based and supposedly less politicized structure. But there are efforts. There are indeed many efforts. If you could just help us do 2 things, if you don't mind. Number one, give us an update on the Show Israel the Red Card campaign, and what is happening on the grassroots level as far as that campaign is concerned. And could that kind of campaigns become the plan B that could be used by the Palestine Football Association?
I think it could, because there have been a series of successes that have happened on the back of that campaign. And even from before that campaign was really organized into the campaign known as Show Israel the Red Card. First and foremost, people are angry in Europe. And whatever opinion they had of the Israeli state before October 7th, now almost 2 years on, has changed significantly. So much so that last year, when Israel was supposed to play in Belgium, Belgium pretty much said, "Sorry, we can't host you because all the municipalities here refuse to do so. Um, and as a result, they played their home game. And this was a minor tournament. This is something called the Nations League. They played their home game in Hungary, which has been the Israelis' home away from home, so to speak. In the Europa League, which is the second tier competition for clubs in Europe, there was a Norwegian club called Bodo Glimt, and they came up against Maccabi Tel Aviv. They didn't withdraw. They didn't do like a huge visceral protest to say, you know what, we find this completely illegitimate. But the fans did something else. They took matters into their own hand. They said, we're going to come to the stadium and we are going to show Palestinian flags for the entirety of the match, for the entire 90 minutes. And we are going to force the club to donate 100% of the gate receipts to Gaza relief. And that's something that wasn't coordinated with the Palestine Football Association. That was just fans on their own deciding, hey, we can't maybe sacrifice this match, right? I think this is sort of the challenge now. The challenge now is, can you get a national team or a group of players to have the stones to potentially sacrifice a World Cup, right? Or sacrifice a chance at a major trophy because they're against the genocide. And I think you probably could push them in that direction, but it needs, one, access to the players. Two, it needs people who can speak to them and explain to them, hey, listen, this is why it's important. And no, you actually have power. You can do something about this. Because in modern football right now, yes, it is a lot about the sponsors. But because everything is so commercialized, the players have more of a voice now. And the more popular they are, the more recognizable they are, the more they can throw their weight around, right? When I mentioned Russia's suspension from FIFA, it was really led by Robert Lewandowski, the captain of Poland and the current striker for Barcelona. Huge star. When we're talking about his generation, probably there's Ronaldo and Messi, and after that there's Lewandowski. So you need people like that in your corner. And I think the Palestine Football Association doesn't realize that with Norway being drawn with Israel in World Cup qualifying, they had a chance to go to Martin Odegaard, who's the captain of Arsenal, Erling Haaland, who is a big star at Manchester City, and to try and get them in their corner. There are many people in Norwegian football that are in solidarity with Palestine. But if you're not leading the charge and giving them ideas on how they can show solidarity, it's going to be very hard for them to say other than, what, this match shouldn't be played. And Martin Odegaard, to his credit, said it was a complete farce that they were playing this match. But if you're not going to give Martin Odegaard the tools, what is he going to do in order to show you support? You haven't even asked him, hey, please show me support by doing X, Y, Z.
Okay, so there's a lot of homework to be done on the part of the Palestine Football Association and other Palestinian sports bodies and individuals as well. If we could just talk a little bit about the Palestine national team, Bassil. I remember growing up, I'm obsessed with football. And as a child growing up in a refugee camp in Gaza, when we began having some sort of a Palestine football representation as a teenager after the Oslo Accords, I just remember how excited we were about the whole concept of it, even though we rarely won any games. And, it was more like symbolic representation. But things began changing in recent years. There's so much advancement in the Palestine football team. And we also see Palestinian footballers are now playing in top leagues in around the world. So if you could just tell us why that is the case, what do you think has happened that could explain this massive jump? And second, if you could introduce us to 2 or 3 of the top players so that our fans or our listeners and viewers could familiarize themselves with them. And I know that our producer would be putting some of these photos of some of these players on this podcast after it's recorded.
Yeah, of course. Let me address the first part of that question, which is what happened for them to be, a nation that, hey, we're recognized by FIFA. We're just happy to be here. We'll participate and we'll take our participants ribbon and go home happy, to a team that now is legitimately competing to be at the World Cup, and is a fixture now at every single Asian Cup. That's Asia's premier competition. And I think it's a couple of things. I mentioned earlier in our discussion that having a league where you play every week, those are the hard yards. It's where players get better, right? With practice, you get better. And the Palestinian leagues have been a closed structure, meaning that they don't have foreign players. Leagues all around the world, they have foreign players. In the Palestinian League, no foreign players, which was a huge blessing in disguise, because it meant that you had to give opportunities to Palestinian players. And if the current players weren't very good, you looked at your youth academy and you said, hey, is there a 17, 18-year-old that's any good? Let's give him a shot. And so that has helped. The other thing that has helped, I think, is just the general advancement in technology. The world is a smaller place. And every time I travel to a far-flung location, or if I visit a country that I haven't been to in 10, 15, 20 years, it really hits you that the world has changed. It's a smaller place. We're all connected. Things like social media, things like YouTube, where you can go and access information, I think sparked something in this generation, in that, hey, if I want to be an elite footballer, I've got tons of examples right on my phone of how to do it, of how to train, of the mentality I need to have, of maybe how somebody in a neighboring country, how a Jordanian player or an Egyptian player did it. I can follow his path as well. So that has also been a seed change. As far as the key players in this team, Ardei Dabakh, he's 26 years old. He was born in the old city of Jerusalem. He's the first Palestinian player to go from the local leagues to a major European league. He's played in the top flight of Portugal, the top flight of Belgium, and he recently won the Scottish Cup with Aberdeen. I've had the pleasure of interviewing him. His story is absolutely amazing, because this is a guy who knows very little about football. You ask him who his favorite team is. I don't watch football. That's never really my thing. I just,
Seriously.
Yeah. He will be the first person to tell you, like, don't ask me about players. I just like to go and kick a ball around with my friends. It turned out I was pretty good at it. It turns out actually that I could score goals. So he used to play as a central defender, and then he got moved gradually further and further up the pitch. Now he's a striker. And his story is sort of indicative of what Palestine is like, a footballing nation, which is people play this game. They live this game. They breathe this game. Even guys who aren't, watching football every weekend go and kick a ball around. And Ardei Dabakh is a perfect example of that.
But isn't Ardei Dabakh's goal that won the cup? I mean, it's the actual goal that ended the game in favor of his team.
So yes, he scored in the semifinal extra time to send Aberdeen to the final against Celtic, and then he scored a brilliant penalty in the shootout. He went top left corner. There was no saving that from Kasper Schmeichel. So immensely talented young man. Another player who I think is a bit of an unsung hero, but one of Asia's best goalkeepers, Rami Hamadi. His stats are absolutely incredible. I think when we go onto the pitch, knowing that he's right there as a last gasp solution if the defense messes up, he can deny Asia's best strikers. If you have some time, go on YouTube and look at the saves he pulled off of South Korea in both games, really. Palestine drew 0-0 and 1-1 in World Cup qualification against a team that's been at every single World Cup since 1986. And he's making saves off of Son, who plays for Tottenham Hotspur, off Lee Kang-in, who plays for PSG. And it was like a walk in the park for him. And the most amazing thing was that when he was doing that, he was without a club. He went without a club for 14 months before he signed in the Qatari second division. And finally, the big star, Wissam Abu Ali, another striker. He plays for Al Ahly in Egypt. He was born in Denmark. He also has a remarkable story in that a couple months after the incident that happened in Euro 2020 with Christian Eriksen fainting on the pitch, he had a very similar episode. And it was, touch and go whether or not he'd be able to continue in football. He did make a comeback. And then a couple of months into his comeback, he broke a bunch of his ribs and punctured his lungs. And so he spent even more time on the sideline. And it just looked like, he was going to retire early and his promise would go unfulfilled. he made his comeback. He was, had to drop down to the Danish second division, scored a bunch of goals, got a move to the Swedish first division, played half a season, kept scoring. Al Ahly came knocking. They realized, hey, you're a Palestinian, you can come to our league and be counted as a local player. Went to Al Ahly, and in half a season with Al Ahly last year, he scored 18 goals. He was top scorer of the Egyptian top flight. Just last week, he scored 4 goals and had 1 assist, and that was the game and the performance that won Egypt won Al Ahly, their 45th Egyptian national title. So those are just 3 players. I'm leaving out a bunch of players. I think there's so many great stories here, but those are maybe the 3 stars.
And do forgive me, I'm not, of course, anywhere close to being as informed about this as you are, but we did have a Palestinian American player. He retired recently, and he was quite a name in the team. Do you recall his name?
Yes, Nazmi al-Badawi. Nazmi al-Badawi is a favorite.
And if he's listening, do forgive me I'm just not as closely following this.
Yeah, so Nazmi al-Badawi, fan favorite. He didn't play all that much, but I don't think there's a player that has made as much of an impact on his teammates and on the fans than he did in his year or so with the national team. He might have retired early, but there is another Palestinian American, another North Carolina native, Ahmed Al-Taq, who was actually recruited into the team by Nazmi al-Badawi. So Nazmi got on the phone to the people on the Palestine Football Association and said, hey, there's a player who plays at my former club. He's Palestinian. He's really good. You should call him up. And I was on the phone earlier with some of my sources in the national team, and they're impressed. They think he's definitely one for the future.
That's absolutely brilliant. I want us to finish with a question, just to talk about the website that you run, Football Palestine. Previous to this podcast, I filmed another podcast earlier this morning, and I was talking to someone who knew that we were going to be interviewing you. And he said that everything he knows about Palestinian football comes from Football Palestine. My son, who's also an aspiring footballer, does the same thing. Can you tell us about why you started Football Palestine, how it evolved over the years, and how it serves as a vital source for fans and analysts alike? And also, what are your plans with this project and other projects?
Yeah, so it sort of started off. It's interesting. I'm of the generation. I'm a millennial, so I'm of the generation that grew up with the internet and poked around the internet and saw that, oh my God, you could access all this information. I was 13 years old when I saw my first Palestine national team game. This is back in 1999. The first time I saw them, I was hooked. I wanted more, so went to the internet, found ways to watch them, found ways to keep up with the team, but then was frustrated by a lack of information. And then I was also frustrated by the fact that a lot of the information that was circulating on the internet back in those days on message boards was not accurate or not verifiable. So I was in university, and I decided back in 2008 that we need an outlet where maybe other like-minded individuals out there can follow the national team. And sort of started as a couple of university kids that just would kind of post their rantings and ravings. And I think it was really right time, right place, because as I continued to do it, the team got better and better and better and better. And then when they qualified for their first Asian Cup back in 2014, I said, okay, actually, I think we can make this a serious thing. It shouldn't be a blog. It should be a fully fledged website, and the information on it. I always was posting verifiable information, but I wanted to do more. I wanted to do analysis, and I wanted to do player interviews, and I really wanted to be a vehicle for people to get to know their national team. Plans for the future. I'm a full-time journalist now. The website still exists, footballpalestine.com. We also run a newsletter through Substack with some premium content for paying subscribers. We are running a competition now. We're giving away a free Palestine jersey. The only thing you need to do to enter is subscribe to Football Palestine on Substack. And then we're sort of tipping the balance in favor of the paying subscribers in the raffle. And really, the journey continues for me. I'm going to continue covering this national team. It seems that they're just going up and up and up and up. And plans for the future, I think I might be writing a book once I have time, probably based on that thought of the national team as a vehicle to tell the Palestinian story.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you for all of your efforts, Bassil. Thank you very much, Bassil, for sharing your insightful perspectives with us today and for all the work that you continue to do. To our audience, thank you for tuning in. As many of you already know, direct engagement is crucial. So please like, share, comment, and follow to support our work. And of course, we are going to be linking to all the websites and other information that Bassil has brought up in this very exciting discussion. And we look forward to our next episode of The Floodgate. Thank you.